Welcome to MQuest TV and my special guests, Dr. Elisa Meadows and Jamie Butler. Elisa's son, Erik, took his own life in 2009 at the age of 20, sending Elisa on a personal journey to understand the afterlife. Jamie Butler, a gifted medium and founder of the Center for Love and Light in Atlanta, Georgia, periodically connects mother and son for insightful conversations about the next realm. I want to thank you both and Erik for having such wonderful video segments and putting out the books and really getting involved and connecting with people, letting people know about this other realm that we have as opposed to just the one that we're living in, and letting us know how we connect to it. You went through such a soul-searching experience after losing your son Erik in 2009. Since then, you've written 2 books, one of which has just been released, called My Life After Death, a Memoir from Heaven. How has this helped your processing after losing him when he committed suicide in 2009?
Well, of course, having a place for people to vent their own grief has helped me, because I tend to heal better when I help other people. I guess that's a doctor in me, I'm not sure. But that's one thing. Secondly, talking to Erik so much through wonderful Jamie. She's his voice, and but especially the memoir. His memoir, My Life After Death, has truly healed me. I can absolutely say that I don't grieve over Erik's death anymore. I miss him, but I don't grieve, because, look, I know how he's doing now. I mean, it's so detailed in this book. I know how he's doing. I know what he's doing, and usually he's up to no good. And I know almost everything about where he is in his new realm. So the mystery's all but gone, and now I just feel like he's some kid that's on some study abroad program, and he's going to come to the door with a big old bag full of dirty laundry any day. It's been healing.
Did any of your beliefs prior to his passing help you? Your spiritual beliefs?
Well, I really didn't have any, to tell you the truth. I didn't. I know it sounds odd, really, and it does seem odd to me now that I even verbalize it. I didn't really think about what happens after death very often. When I was a little girl, I was having a particularly bad day. I had very abusive parents. And I remember saying, and they were both atheists, by the way, militant atheists. And I remember saying, God, if you exist, I want proof right now. And I didn't get any, so that closed that whole chapter for me until after Erik's death. And, being a physician, my whole world is science, so material science anyway teaches us that something doesn't really exist. It's not real unless you can perceive it with one of your senses or measure it with an instrument. And I couldn't measure Erik. I couldn't see him. I couldn't smell him. Eventually I did. But so it made it very difficult to answer that question. Is Erik gone forever? And if not, where is he?
I understand that after a while he started to connect with you. There was like some paranormal experiences that you had in your family that made you realize that maybe he was still around?
Good question. The first, and this happened 3 days after Erik's death. The first was the one event that started my journey from skeptic to believer, and that's a call from my militantly atheist father. And he's the kind of guy who would not want to do this to make people feel better at all. So he calls me all panicky. And he said that he was sitting in his chair reading a newspaper or something. Then he looks up and there's Erik standing right in front of him. And then he said that Erik turned into his little boy self and crawled up into his lap. And then he disappeared. And my father's like, I'm so startled. I don't know what to believe. So here's an atheist recounting this story. And that got me thinking. And that's when I started exploring. The only thing I knew to do is look into the science behind it. I read all sorts of books on quantum physics, near-death experience, controlled studies on mediums, papers on the evidence for alternate dimensions, all sorts of things. I read that people do connect with mediums, especially parents, to try to connect with their children. And I didn't have any place else to go, so I took a leap of faith. And I tell you, Jamie is just, I cannot tell you how amazing she is. First of all, I don't think she even knew I had a son, much less one that killed himself. And that's one of the first things she said, your son's here. And he said he killed himself. And she went on to describe where he was. They were sitting at his desk. that he used a gun, what kind of gun it was, the exact description of the clothes he was wearing. But even more importantly, she captured his personality. His rascally, mischievous personality and his verbiage that's so peppered with sailor talk. And Jamie, you loved that, didn't you? You loved dropping those F-bombs for Erik, huh? But so that was so convincing to me that I went ahead and booked other sessions, and at the same time, we were receiving all sorts of crazy pranks. Airsoft BBs would appear at the ceiling and drop to the ground. Faucets would turn on in front of us. Appliances that were unplugged would turn on. Unplugged, no power. He called us on the telephone once without, it was during the election campaign. And I was getting those annoying robocalls on and on and on. And I was very busy, and my attention span is like the size of a gnat embryo sometimes. So I was really struggling to try to keep my hearing this ringing and ringing and ringing and ringing. It just would, the answering machine, pick up, come on. Finally it did, and there was Erik. Mom, it's me, Erik, it's me. And I flew to the phone, picked it up too late. He was gone. There was no message on the machine. It did not record. It didn't pick up his voice. Plus, it was a 12-digit number or something, and I called that number, and it was not a working one. So, and one time I even saw him. I went to bed, and right after I laid my head down, before I went to sleep, I saw him jumping from one foot of the bed to the next, back and forth, like a little bunny rabbit. And my deceased sister Denise was on the left foot of the bed, looking and like grinning at him, like, you're such a fool. And I was following with my eyes, I just back and forth. It was just so surreal. That is Erik, and I am totally awake. And then all of a sudden he turns to me and looks completely startled. He says, Mom, you can see me. He flies into my arms, and we hug each other. And I'm telling you, Marion, it felt absolutely solid. It felt like my boy, hugging my boy.
Jamie, I understand that you had these abilities for such a long time. I mean, what was it like for you to grow up with being able to see spirits, and while many other people can't?
Well, I didn't know that other people couldn't. When you're little and you see what you see, there's just this unspoken expectation that everybody else is experiencing the same thing too. So it wasn't until I was about 6, 7 years old did my mother just kind of tell me, this kind of talk has to stop. You shouldn't know these things. It's imagination. And as soon as I moved away for college and stepped away from my household, everything came back. And so from age 18 on, it was just kind of mastering what is this really, and discovering that it ran in my family, and how should I manage it and use it.
How old were you when you finally decided to sort of decide to let everybody know?
To give in? It was a scary moment, actually. And I was probably just before 21 years old did I decide that, okay, I will use this to help other people. And I don't think I even believed in it then. It just feels more like this imagination land, and I'm hearing stories and I'm just repeating them. And it was a very easy flow. But watching other people finding confirmation in it and finding answers that they've been missing and needing was astounding. And I decided at age 26 that this was going to be it. I'm going to do this. I'm going to dedicate my time towards it.
So the first time you ever connected to Erik, what was that like for you?
It's a memory I hold close. It's unique, different than the other ones, because here was this young, kind of thin kid who had messy hair, and he looked like an angel, but as soon as he opened up his mouth, it was cuss words and raw details of his passing. And this was unlike the other readings I did. Not like every one of them is angelic, but definitely didn't come in with all this sailor talk. And I remember thinking to the mother on the other end, going, well, he's kind of saying a dirty word. And Elisa was like, Jamie, just say everything he says. Go for it. That's how my boy is. I was like, really? Okay. So I'm saying the words, and Erik still teaches me, Jamie, don't get hung up on that language. He goes, it's just a word. It's the intent behind it that has the value. I'm like, okay. So I keep up with him now, but still a challenge.
You say you can see him visually. as well as
Yes.
hear him. Is it a very solid figure, or I mean, what would it look like?
Mostly the way that I see spirit is they look transparent. Remember those old transparencies they would put up in the college classrooms? You could hold it up, you could see through it, but you could see all the details in it as well. But there have been a few occasions where Erik will show up quite solid, where I can't see what's behind him. And that always sets off the alarm system, is there another person here with me? Do I need to defend myself? And then you realize, no, it's Erik. And Erik has come to say hello.
Lisa, what was that first time like when you, for the very first time, Jamie connected or brought the two of you together? I mean, that must have been exciting.
It was very exciting because, especially because of the description she shared initially, how accurate they were. I thought, wow, I might be talking to my son. So it was just very healing. But I'll tell you this, even with all the pranks and the evidence and the sessions and so on and so forth, I couldn't get to 100% certainty until one particular thing happened. I kind of hovered at 90% sure that this is all real. And I think it's because I was afraid to. Because imagine if I did totally buy it, hook, line, and sinker, and then found out it was all nonsense. Yeah. That would be like losing Erik again, but permanently. I mean, forever. So I did not want to believe. These are not in my book, these are not the words of a grieving mother, the desperate attempt to hang on to her child. So, but then one day, I think maybe 4 years after his passing, I received a call from one of the blog members who said that they heard voices on one of Jamie's recorded sessions. And I thought, well, that's impossible. Yeah. There was nobody else but Jamie and I and me. And so, of course, I listened to where she said the timestamp was. And yep, there were 3 voices. And one of them was most definitely Erik's. I mean, I know my own kid's voice. He had this way, for example, of saying breakfast like a little kid, breakfast. He said that, and I could hear his verbal tick. He had all sorts of ticks. He would do that all the time. Heard that. I heard his incessant pacing. Jamie, he paces everywhere.
Paces everywhere. He never stands still.
They never stand still. And so I was intrigued enough, even though I thought this is definitely my kid, was intrigued enough to have the sound professional analyze it. And he said, yep, these voices are not human. They left no voice print at all. So there we are, 100% certain, never going to go back.
I wanted to ask Erik some questions, if he doesn't mind. I mean, is he okay with that?
Yeah, first he wants to nail you to the wall. To tell you, the hardest part about this is staying quiet when Erik says 1,000 things when the two of you are talking. And I'm constantly in my head going, Erik, adult time, Erik. Let them have adult time. He laughs. He wanted to point out something. Okay, here are his words. He's like, hey, Miriam, what's up? He said, I was listening to you talk to my mom, and you said something that I know you don't really mean. And he goes, I wanted to bring it to everybody's attention because you were talking about death and losing your parents and your friends and everything. And you said, oh, I understand. He says, that's bullshit. He goes, I've watched you. You don't resonate with the whole thinking thing and understanding things. He goes, it's time. He puts his hands up. He goes, it's time for some homework. He goes, why don't you look at the words that you're using because they're not matching exactly what you're saying. He goes, because you definitely sign up to connecting to emotional state of being. You're like preaching it and everything to people. And he goes, I'm behind you 100%. And then for you to throw out, oh, I understand. He goes, what? He goes, come on. You resonate with what my mom went through because you emotionally had similar situations. He goes, but you don't understand it. That's the whole logical vibration. He goes, and that's totally not you because I've seen you. I've witnessed you. He goes, so double check your words before they fall out of your mouth because what you do is absolutely beyond par. Beyond par. And he goes, I want your words to be there too with you. So he goes, but you're all about the emotional quality. He said, you have this thing where you're very truthful about how you feel and you're very forward with that. He goes, so find some words that speak from that level rather than the head level. And he puts his hand up here like,
Sounds like,
I see. So really you're saying, Erik, that she follows her intuition, her emotions, but she's using words that make people believe that she's using her head, her logic, when she's really not that kind of a person.
He's applauding. Thanks, Mommy.
Okay.
I'm not without skills.
All right, so I have to look into that as far as how to put that on the same level, like how I express myself instead of using. I'll have to look at it. I don't even know.
Yeah. He goes, that's the first step. Just look at it, because he goes, man, he throws his arms out. You're just effing incredible.
Be sure to stay tuned for part 2 of Afterlife Connections and get your copy of My Life After Death, a memoir from heaven, out in stores now. Please visit MQuestMedia.com, where you can find articles, special events, and our monthly internet radio show Hidden Mysteries with my co-host, Reverend Maria DeAndrea.